Order, please rise for the entrance of Mayor Michael Fougere.
Good evening, everyone. We'll begin the meeting with a prayer. We beseech thee, Lord, to bestow wisdom upon members of this council in order that their decisions may be founded in justice and prudence. Amen. Please be seated. Well, we have a special presentation on the Henry Baker scholarships we'll deal with now before we get to the actual agenda, and I'll turn it over to Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I'll invite you to come into the middle circle when you can. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to represent Council as we introduce all of the Scholarship Award winners. This has been a long-standing program from City Council in Regina. What you'll hear tonight from me is an introduction of a number of people who have chosen to make academic success a part of their life. These are committed young people. I always get a chance to be the one to introduce them in these last few years, and we'll tell you that it's always a restoration of faith in humanity and a positive notion of what our future has before us. So I would like to introduce each of these people. So are you going to come up to the middle? Yep. Come on over now. So when I introduce each one of them, I'll ask them to come forward and be acknowledged by the mayor. I'll finish with a thank you or acknowledgement and ask each of you to join me in recognizing these people. We award scholarships to students who attend SIAST, First Nations University, and University of Regina. And I will begin with the SIAST students. And we do this by category with entrance in first year, second year, and so on. So I'll introduce who they are and where they come from. And if mom or dad or grandma or grandpa would like to take a picture, I invite you into the circle here and just stand over on the one side, and Mayor would be happy to pose with you. So I begin with SIAST entrance. This is Kelsey Filipchuk. This lifelong resident in Regina and graduate of Belford Collegiate has a passion for photography. Kelsey has volunteered with her church, done a photographer for a number of hockey teams from the Silver Foxes to the Pats, and after completing a 2-year graphic arts diploma, she would like to pursue a career including photography, and it would also include working with the hockey team. We wish you continued success, Kelsey. You can clap. It's okay. Brittany Sagal. During her time at Michael A. Riffle High School, Brittany volunteered at her school in a variety of roles and at the Humane Society. She is pursuing a career in the dental field, eventually hoping to become a dental hygienist. This is a hardworking, dedicated student who sets high academic goals for herself. We know you will do well, Brittany. Congratulations. Ulysses Laput. Originally from the Philippines and a one-time Toronto resident, this gentleman's goal is to become a licensed practical nurse. He already has experience working at Wascana Rehab and has a wife and child, and tells us he has grown to love Regina, our friendly people, and he wishes to serve our community in his work and in his faith. Congratulations, Ulysses. First Nations University entrant, Cheyenne Esmond. A recent graduate of Tom Collegiate, this Trojan helped with many fundraising activities at her school, has been a science camp junior counselor at the U of R, and is a lifeguard with the City of Regina. Cheyenne would like to pursue a career in law and is giving consideration to a political career as well. And after taking the International Baccalaureate program, it should be as no surprise that Cheyenne has a goal to maintain a 90-plus average. Cheyenne, we look forward to hearing more about you in the future. So you'll note as I introduce each one of these that I make oft reference to the notion of volunteerism. That's one of the categories in the scholarship, and it's one of those things that we are promoting, obviously, in our community. Diane Adams. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Diane anyway. A former president and vice president of First Nations University Student Association, is pursuing a Bachelor of Applied Science in Environmental Health and Science. Often volunteering, Diane has been recognized by the Canadian Institute of Public Health Inspectors for her academic success and professional activities as a student. Diane is also a freelance writer and journalist, nominated for awards and published in high school textbooks. Diane has a very bright future. Please acknowledge her. Jacqueline Anaquad. Jacqueline is proud of her Cree Saulteaux heritage and was recently chosen as one of 5 interesting women in Saskatchewan. A long list of volunteering from student president for First Nations University to being a member of the Regina Adult Learning Center frame this committed woman. Her career goal is in the health sciences area with a concentration in indigenous health, and is proud that her daughter is a champion powwow dancer. Well done, young lady. University of Regina entrance, Human Ali. This recent grad of Sheldon Williams is enrolled in pre-optometry and graduate program with the desire to become an optometrist. She had the unique opportunity to shadow an optometrist in both the UK, and I can say the UK because it is still the UK, and here in Regina, prior to making her career decision, a mature, well-informed young lady. This gifted student has been already awarded a $3,000 Centennial Merit Plus Scholarship. I believe you have a bright future. Second year, Hossam Abu Tak. This young man is here while his parents remain in Syria. He has volunteered and been recognized for his involvement in English as a second language program. He aspires to study medicine after completing a degree in biochemistry. We are fortunate you have chosen Regina as your home. Good luck, sir. You notice how he kind of leaned down to be not quite taller than the mayor. Okay. Yep. Lindsay Chow. Oh, did I miss Sarah? I'm sorry. I'll do Sarah first. Sorry, pardon me. Sarah Guy. Currently enrolled in an undergraduate program in kinesiology, she aspires to become a physiotherapist. Volunteering with the Y and acting as a big sister, she has also held jobs as a pharmacy assistant and the Milky Way manager. After her master's degree in physiotherapy, Sarah would like to set up practice here in Saskatchewan. We appreciate you sharing your talents and skills with our city and your province. Good luck. Third or fourth year, Lindsay Chow. Fourth year. Come on, Lindsay. This fourth year student has volunteered extensively around the university. On the dean's list, while she pursues 2 undergraduate degrees, Lindsay aspires to teach both math and English at the high school level. Future students will be blessed to have you as their teacher. Cassandra Fisher. A proud Métis woman, Cassandra is in her 4th year with the Sask Urban Native Teachers Education Program. She wishes to attain academic understanding and as a teacher to bring Aboriginal culture to her classroom. She has volunteered with the Dress for Success, Help Portrait, Terry Fox Run, and our local Roller Derby Club. Cassandra has also 6 years of experience with the Residential Schools Adjudication Secretariat. We are pleased that you're part of our community. Postgraduate, Jennifer Balan. As a volunteer, Jennifer has focused on the Aboriginal Grandmothers Caring for Grandchildren Support Network. She is completing a Master's of Science in Kinesiology and Health Studies. Her research fuels her passion for working with Aboriginal cultures seeking positive health outcomes through community-based health research. Our community will be well served by your research. Catherine Svensson. During her career at the U of R, Catherine has received over 22 awards and scholarships. She is currently enrolled in a PhD program and president of the Kinesiology and Health Graduate Student Committee. Her dissertation is going to focus on the role of power in the relationships between team organization and sport fans. Despite a demanding academic commitment, this scholarship winner has an extensive volunteer history with the U of R Rams, from World Junior Hockey and all the way to the Grey Cup. We congratulate you, young lady. We're also joined by a number of the people that helped to make these decisions, representing their various institutions. I'd like to introduce them and ask them as well to come down, please. Todd Schwartz from the City of Regina, Jim Nickel from the City of Regina, Erica Frank from the City of Regina, Danielle Schoenhofen is from the U of R. She will not be here tonight. Tiana Yaskow from the U of R, Melanie Britton from SciAst, and Brendan Edwards from First Nations University. These are our people who commit a whole lot of time and effort to make sure that we get the right people. Could you please acknowledge them? And I'll ask everyone. Yeah. We're going to do a team photo.
So we'll begin our formal agenda. If I could have a motion for the agenda, please.
I'll move the agenda at the call of the chair, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. A seconder, please. Councillor Young. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The minutes from the meeting on August 25th, 2014. A motion for that, please. Councillor Hawkins. A seconder, please. Councillor Bryce. Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move into the delegations, public notice bylaws, and related reports. Our first delegation, D14-81, Gord Mertler. Could you please come forward? Mr. Mertler, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. If you could identify yourself and tell us who you represent. And then afterwards, council may have questions. So the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay. My name is Gord Mertler. I'm a partner in the ownership of the strip mall that we're looking at redeveloping. I'll provide just a brief history of the property. We purchased the strip mall 5 years ago. The building had been constructed in 2 phases in and around 1950 or 1960. 4 years ago, we added a new facade on the tired 50-plus-year-old building to improve the curb appeal for retail and service sector uses. In July last year, there was an electrical panel fire, resulting in the forced vacancy of 3 of the 4 tenants. Royal Sporting Goods remained, and since the fire, we have been able to reinstall Big Sky Cycle in the westerly end cap. The fire allowed us to step back and reevaluate the building and its location amid the rejuvenated Regina Warehouse District. The idea of adding residential apartments surfaced, and we proceeded to contact a local architectural firm and subsequent structural engineer. We found the building is of sound construction and with some additional concrete piling could support a six-suite residential addition on a second floor. The depth of the current building's main floor units allows the provision for 6 indoor parking stalls at the rear, 1 for each suite. By reducing the depth of the main floor, it makes this area more marketable for retail and service sector tenancies. What we are attempting to do is threefold: turn a bad situation into a positive for the building and the property, provide additional residential suites in close proximity to the downtown, and add value for the owners. We're very pleased with Alton Tangent's conceptual plan for this redevelopment and hope the city sees this as a positive for the area as well. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Mertler. I'll see if there's any questions from members of council. You're pretty straight. Oh.
Thanks. Thanks for coming forward. If you don't do what you're proposing to do, are you just going to Band-Aid the building back up and rent it out, or what's the plan?
Yes. Well, we've got 2 tenancies in there right now. In the middle portion is where we want to build the second floor over. So what we would do is fix that up and put it up for lease as well.
Yeah.
This gave us an opportunity because the depth is like 100 feet, and that's fairly deep for retail units. So this is allowing us to make that a little bit more shallow, and with the parking in the back, and also increase the retail component off the street.
Thanks. And through you, and you're talking about rental property, right? 6 rentals?
This is a rental property,
sale.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. Have you talked to the warehouse district at all? I know that planning you didn't, but I didn't know. I wondered if you had.
No.
Okay.
I think we'd like to think we're in the ballpark with what their plans are, but I know we haven't had a one-on-one
Good
conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Other questions? You can return to the gallery now, and we'll consider the report before us. This is D 14-102, and this is a mixed-use building at Max Zone at 1815 7th Avenue. Councilor O'Donnell.
As you have introduced this report, that's exactly what it is, and we have heard from the delegation about what he is trying to do. I feel very comfortable in the fact that we would like to add not only people to the warehouse district, but we would like to increase the number of rentals that are in there as well. So the building is located just off of Broad Street. Public transit is right there. It's right across the street from the Sears warehouse, and there are other very thriving businesses right along this area. So it's a nice place to add some additional residential. There are other residential areas very close to this. Planning Commission felt very comfortable with this as being a very good idea. Seek concurrence, please.
And we'll need a seconder for that one. Councilor Murray moves
I'll second it. Speak
okay. Comments on this report? Councilor Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and I'll keep my comments very short. It is great to see residential moving into the warehouse district, and just actually across the street is the Brownstone, another prime example of a building that has residential above commercial, and how the two can interact and work very well. Again, having residential in the neighborhood brings in people all times of the day, which is important as well to creating a thriving and vibrant neighborhood. So definitely in support, and appreciate the work that went into this report and bringing us a great report. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Other comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now the bylaw. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I move seconded by Councillor Bryce that bylaw number 2014-71 be introduced and read for a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. As required by the Planning and Development Act, Council will now consider bylaw 2014-71 respecting the proposed zoning of 2 lots to ensure that all property under one ownership has the same zoning designation. If there is anyone additional in the chamber who wishes to address Council, I would ask that you indicate your interest at this time. There appears to be no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaw number 2014-71 be read a second time.
Any comments on this motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that the Council hereby consent to bylaw 2014-71 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaw 2014-71 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Burnett. We'll now move into, I'm not sure we have all the delegations here. Mr. Cook, you were speaking with the members in the gallery here. There are 2 members here, Mr. Vandenberg and Mr. Peters, I believe. Are they both here? You'll note the motion for the agenda was at the call the chair. I'd like to defer this point until both members get here. Are members okay with that? If that's okay, then we'll move on to report 104. And I'd ask Councillor Bryce to introduce that one. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I stand to move CR 14-104, which has to do with the sale of asphalt mixes and granular recycled materials to external customers. The gist of the report says that we will not look into selling the asphalt mixes, but we will look into the recycled materials sales.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bryce. Any seconder for that, please? Councillor Young. Any comments or questions on this report? Oh. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a quick question for administration. I'm just wondering, how will this relate to future roadworks in the city, supposing that we are to ramp up the amount of street repair we're doing in years to come? You know, right now we're talking about the capacity of our own plant for an internal dealings. You know, it's not quite running at full capacity, but is there a chance that the internal demand for asphalt will be so much on the increase that we'll have to keep it internally? Thanks.
Mr. Archer? Oh, Ms. Gazmo, please. Everybody's pointing the finger down in one direction. I just wonder who's going to let me take this one, so please. No, you're stuck with it now.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is additional capacity within our existing plant that with some of the plans we have in the future for expanding our work on roadway repair, we will have that capacity within our existing plant.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. I just want to understand, so if we fix the road on our own staff, we use our asphalt. But if a contractor fixes our roads, do we supply them the asphalt, or do they buy their own asphalt from other plants, or how does that work today?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically when we contract out work, the contractor supplies both the service and the material.
And the material. In this report, have we looked at, is that what we're talking about? Is that's the sale part we're talking about, not selling it to contractors? Is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what this report had contemplated is there are and have been contractors in town that have looked and requested to purchase asphalt for us, whether it was for a city project or other projects. We have looked at the availability of what's in the market, and the market has changed significantly in the last year, and that is no longer as much of an issue as it had been in the past. There are more producers in the market that make more product available.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I want to ask about the granular material. I had occasion to visit the landfill this week. I was greeted by a mountain when you turn the corner of this material. So my question begins with, is that all crushed concrete, that mountain that when I see at the doorway?
Ms. Gizmo?
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a clarification? Are you talking about at the landfill or at the yards?
Yeah, at the landfill.
At the landfill, I believe, yes, that is all crushed concrete.
So aside from the mountain, there is also piles of concrete that are there. So I'm assuming they'll also be crushed in the future and add to the supply.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
So this is where I'm really going with this. Are we doing a good job of attracting all of this concrete that is being tore up around the city as we are being redeveloped? And is it, I don't want to say 100%, but is it 100% coming our way instead of being dumped somewhere else because there's a useful value for it?
Ms. Gizmo?
Mr. Mayor, it somewhat depends on the site in which it's taken from. If it's clean and that there isn't a lot of dirt mixed into it, I think it can be deposited into that site. If it has a mixed type of debris in it, then it's less recoverable from that process.
Okay, thanks for that. And I note also in a lot of this concrete there is rebar. I noticed there's a pile of rebar. Is there some value in that as well?
Ms. Gizmo?
Mr. Mayor, I'll ask Mr. Malowski if he could provide some information on what we do with the rebar from that process.
Mr. Malowski?
Through His Worship, the rebar is the residue from the crushing contract. Typically, we hire a contractor who bids on the job, and it is the responsibility of the contractor to utilize the rebar. Typically, it's being recycled either at Regina Evra's place or some other foundry.
Thank you. So out of all of this, this is a really good news story. We often have blue bins that roll out from our little neighborhood homes, and we take this stuff and recycle it. This is massive amounts of material that have value and add more value as it gets reused. This is a very good feel-good story for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other speakers on the report? Councilor Burnett, could you take the chair for a moment, please?
Mr. Mayor?
Just a short comment on this. I know there's some media reports that we were, in spite of this report, going to Works and Infrastructure, that we were selling asphalt this year. So the report speaks for itself, but I would just want to say publicly that that the recommendation is to not sell asphalt, and that when we want to sell asphalt, we'll talk to the industry in the future. But right now, we are not selling asphalt. I had calls from the Heavy Construction Association and others concerned about this one, and I suggested they take a look at the report and read it. They'll see that. The other part, of course, was just referenced by Councilor O'Donnell, which is the recycling materials. That's very much a separate market, a separate issue, and I think anybody reasonable, knowing when we stockpile that much at a landfill in other areas, and there's value to it, let's move it out. The purpose of that is quite different, and it's fair game. But for those here tonight watching, the message is clear. We are not selling asphalt. We are not flooding the market with surplus asphalt to drive the price down. It is very much a discussion with the industry, and we partner with the industry, but we are not selling asphalt. Thank you. No other speakers on this report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to our next report. Executive Committee report, North Central Sheriff Facility. Councilor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It gives me pleasure to bring forward CR 14105, which is the North Central Shared Facility. There's a number of recommendations in this report, but if I
may get a seconder for this, if I could. Councilor Bryce. Okay.
I would like to just highlight three of the main recommendations, as there's a number of recommendations, but this report basically highlights in the area Recommendation number 1, that the city manager or his designate be delegated the authority to negotiate and approve a development master agreement and a master agreement which provides for the development and operation of an integrated facility in the north central neighborhood of Regina to be owned and operated by the City of Regina, the Regina Public School Board, and the Regina Public Library, as further described in this report. Another key item, recommendation number 2, is subject to 2015 and future years budget approval. City Council approved the following recommendation: that funding of $8.8 million to construct the facility and an additional investment of $390,000 in ongoing operation costs be approved and be funded. The third recommendation, subject to 2017 budget approval, City Council approved the following recommendation: that a water detention pond, including related landscaping and standard athletic facilities, be developed and funded by the city on the site at a cost of $4 million to be financed through capital funding for water and sewer capital projects in the 17 budget, with the Regina Public Library contributing $7,063 and the Regina School Board contributing $91,863 to the landscaping and athletic portion of the development. And there's a number of other administrative recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Speakers on this very important report. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. It is my pleasure to support this project. Sometimes it takes a long time for really good things to come together, especially when it means that many people have to sit down together and work together and collaborate to make it happen. And that's what's happened in this case. And so it's taken, well, maybe 10 years or more for it to come to fruition. And not only will it benefit the students who go to Scott with a program that is quite different and quite engaging, and they're already beginning to do that program at Scott, but it also brings together members of the community and groups from the community in that same building who will work together to assist with the education of the students, but also to work with the North Central community itself. So I really look forward to the shovel that goes into the ground and to seeing the finished product. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other speakers on this report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think this is a significant occurrence. Although it's taken time to get here, I think that what is important is that we have to look at what is possible. I think there's a change in how we may look at facilities based on what will happen here. The old one-room schoolhouse doesn't exist, and of course it hasn't for a long time, but maybe the typical school doesn't exist as it used to after this type of venture. But I think also how the community interacts in a facility and shares also may be challenging for what we want to do in the future. We've oft talked about multi-purpose. We oft talk about partnership. We oft talk about all sorts of collaborative measures. This may be actually putting mortar to that. This will be a place where people from all over the city can gather. One of the things we heard in executive that I liked a lot is that the school program that will be offered at Scott is not just for the people in this area of the city, but in fact they will be bringing kids in from all over, just like to do with Campus Regina Public, to share in what is good and going on in here. We have a sport corridor from Mosaic Stadium over to the hockey rinks and so on. And the reason that that was done, wisely I would suggest a long time ago, so we always want to bring people back to the inside of the city. So if we look at where Scott's shared facility is on 6th and 7th Avenue, depending on which way it'll face, it's also, in my view, tied to what we will do at the Mosaic lands. It's also tied to what we'll do along Dudney Avenue. It's also tied with the new stadium. It's also tied with all the things that are going on in Evraz Place. This is one of those things that will stand out now and in the future, but also may ask us how we do libraries and schools and joint services in the future. I like it that these people are taking a risk. I like it that they're bringing innovation into this neighborhood. I think this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. This has been talked about since I was first elected in 2003, so it has been a very long road to reach tonight. So I think that the education portion of it has been talked about, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the community portion of this project, which includes the library and the space for the city of Regina as well. So here we are with a facility that can accommodate all of that. They're sharing space, sharing meeting rooms, sharing the operations of it. It's sort of a groundbreaking thing for us in the city here to see this happen with all these partners working together. So it's been a long time coming, so I say let's get on with it and get moving.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other comments? Councillor Hinks.
Well, as the only graduate of Scott Collegiate, this is great to see it develop into such a great project for our city, and having so many things in one place, and all the things that Councillor O'Donnell said. Is what it's all about. It brings everything together and everything to our inner city and improves our inner city.
Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Other comments? I'd be remiss if we didn't actually recognize our staff who have done a great job. In this sense, we're here at council, and I know many people have done this, but I think Mr. Holden, who is now deeply involved, has been involved with this, should be acknowledged for the great work he did as leading the city's side of this one. I know there's many partnerships mentioned, but Mr. Holden, thank you very much on behalf of the City Council and the citizens for bringing this forward. It is about time. We'll stabilize the North Central community. It's very good. Councilor Bryce. Yeah, I'm just speaking in terms of the city, the library board as well, of course, and we could speak of the police service as well being involved as well. So many great partners make a great circumstance. Now you want to speak, Councilor Murray. I've been asking you to speak.
Well, I know you were asking me, Your Worship. I'm always humbled when I think about the fortune that our community has to have a group of people, 11, that look after it. It wasn't that long ago that North Central wore a title that was given to us by a national magazine. And it wasn't that long ago that people had a fairly derogatory view of that community. And it wasn't that long ago that we didn't see ourselves getting out from under the challenges that faced us. But those organizations that could got involved and began to help. Organizations like the library, like the police. The school board decided it was time to start making changes. And of course the city was on side right away. And at the end of all that, we have a brand new facility that's going to serve the needs of the community far beyond what most people will ever experience in any other facility. This will be a groundbreaking, state-of-the-art, brand new concept. Long gone are those days of building swimming pools that are good for 12 or 13 weeks of the year. Today we want to build facilities that we can use 24/7. We get the best value out of them. That's what this is. Your Worship, as I said, I'm humbled. I truly am that my community has the support of this entire council and this entire community all the way around to come back and give to a place that I call home, a place that I've raised my family in, and a community that is mending and growing and becoming the desirable place that it is today. So thank you, Your Worship, and I look forward to the support.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other speakers on this? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Move on to bylaws, but we'll have to, given a delegation didn't speak to us on the transit fare amendment. So I'd ask for Councillor Burnett if you could move a tabling motion for bylaw 214-67.
Your Worship, I would like to move that we table bylaw number 2014-67.
Second for that. Councillor Murray. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. If you could proceed with the next two bylaws.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that bylaws 2014-73 and 2014-75 be introduced and read for the first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaw number 2014-73 and 2014-75 be read a second time.
Any comments on the bylaws? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that Council hereby consent to bylaws number 2014-73 and 2014-75 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. You finished? Okay.
Thank you.
So I believe that we have our delegation on transit that's here. So I would ask that we move back to the delegations, and I'll just go back to my paper here to get this. David Vandenberg and Devin Peters, if you could please come forward. If you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for presentation. and there may be questions of members of council afterwards.
Good evening, Mayor Fougere and City Councilors. My name is David Vandenberg, and I'm a student at the University of Regina, as well as the director of Regina Green Ride Transit Network. I'm joined today by Devin Peters, president of the University of Regina Students Union. Today, Mr. Peters and I are here to speak on transit from the perspective of students. You may recall last year's City Council meeting on budget when I, along with Brooke Patterson, also of the Students Union, spoke to Council and urged you to consider increasing transit spending in order to keep up with the demands of a rapidly growing city. Today, we believe the city is taking a step in the right direction by recognizing the need for increased funding for transit, an essential social service. While it is unfortunate that user fees have to be raised in order to meet this need, we do recognize and understand that services cost money, and that money must come from somewhere. This increase shows the desire by the city to at least maintain its transit system. Transit improvement is important to us because many students at the University of Regina depend on the transit system. Unfortunately, the current system often falls short of meeting the needs of students who have transit demands around the clock, early mornings and late nights. Students use the bus and they want to use it more. They want increased service, and we are very confident that they are willing to put their money where their mouths are in order to get it. Last February, we talked of the Universal Bus Pass, the U-Pass. The U-Pass is a bus pass for all university students, paid for by a per-semester levy applied to all students. This levy allows for a subsidized student bus pass and an increased bus rider population. We have been meeting diligently with city councilors and city transit officials, working on a deal that we think would favor both students and the city. Following a successful referendum, which we are planning for this upcoming February-March 2015, this deal would bring the city an additional $1.2 million annually from the U-Pass fee, compared to the $400,000 that the city currently receives from sales at the University of Regina. More importantly than revenue, however, is the increase in ridership that the U-Pass would guarantee to Regina Transit. Regina's transit investment plan targets the goal of a 45% cost recovery ratio by 2017. This will not be achieved by raising bus fares today. This will not be achieved by simply maintaining the transit system in its current state. An improved cost recovery requires increased ridership. And the ridership wants extended services. A U-Pass will provide new riders. This has been proven all over Canada. But ensuring those riders continue to use transit and adopt transit as a lifestyle requires a commitment to improving the system.
With the loss of parking spots this semester on campus, we're confident that the U-Pass will pass. Now, we need to be confident that the city will be willing to invest on their side of the deal. With this in mind, and in light of the upcoming 2015 budget discussions, we are asking the city once again to continue to expand their investment in transit. We would like to see at a minimum 5 new buses purchased for the transit system and put onto routes that students use the most. But even with that, we recognize that new buses isn't the magic bullet. We need to have improved service, more bus riders or more routes operating in the evenings, more bus operators working for the city, so that the needs of students who are now more international and less likely to have a car, and who are now more likely to be taking classes in the early morning or in the evening, we need the city to recognize and fulfill that need. As students, we want the city to realize, as we said, that increased cost recovery cannot be expected without increased investment into the city, into the system. The case in point of that, in 2008, the University of Saskatoon implemented
You have 30
the
seconds
U-Pass.
left in your presentation time.
Okay.
30 seconds left.
Okay. In 2008, the University of Saskatoon implemented the U-Pass and saw an increased ridership of more than 20% in the first year. The city of Saskatoon wasn't ready for it. They hadn't prepared the year in advance and heeded the warnings of their student politicians. In other cities that were more prepared first-year ridership increases are in the range of 50%. We want to partner with you to build the transit system and to build a generation of riders that use transit. Today, Regina is booming, and now is the time to create a transit system for a new generation of lifelong riders.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. I'm sure there'll be questions of members of council. Councilor Hawkins?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Vandenberg, Mr. Peters, for coming forward. I have some questions about three aspects of your presentation. I'd like you, if you could, to tell us something about the history of canvassing the student body, the recent history of canvassing student body at the University of Regina on the question of a compulsory bus pass.
So in the last 10 years, the question has come up, I believe, 3 times? Yeah.
And can you give me some details on those 3 times?
Over the past 10 years, it has failed all 3 times. However, as we stated during our presentation, we've lost 300 parking spots on the north side of campus this year, and students are walking further than ever to get classes. So we feel like the situation has changed significantly.
I'll come to the loss of parking spots in a minute, but first of all, I want to ask you a little more about the 2009 referendum on this issue 5 years ago. Do you have the results of that referendum?
Not in front of me.
Does this sound correct to you? And I'm quoting from a CBC News report of March 27, 2009. The issue captured the attention of students with vigorous yes and no campaigns running through the week, but when all the votes were counted, it wasn't even close. Of the 2,666 votes cast, 1,887 votes, or 71%, said no, and 779 said yes, 29%. Does that accord with your understanding?
Sounds correct.
And then this from the student union after that. I wasn't hugely surprised. U of R student union president Jessica Sinclair said, I think a lot of people were offended about being taxed for a service they felt that the city should have been providing anyway. Any comment on that?
Jessica was the president at the time and wasn't in favor of the idea. As the current president, I'm much more in favor of the idea, and I'd say generally the campus is more amenable to it. During the previous year, David's done a substantial amount of work preparing students and bringing forward the issue, and largely the responses we've received have been much more positive.
Do you have those responses with you today? Can you give me any figures?
We haven't committed to a quantifiable survey yet.
However, if I can add, Brooke Patterson, who was with me last year, Vice President of Student Affairs, she actually did send out a survey to students who indicated more than 50% were in favor of a UPass.
Do you have the number of people who returned that survey?
I do not have the exact number, but it was, I think she received over 500 returns.
Let me ask you this. There was an election for URSU president and URSU executive officers in March of 2014, I believe. In that election, 12,270 students were eligible to vote. 1,664 did vote, 13.6%. I believe Mr. Peters, who became president, with 796 votes. Was the UPass a major issue in that election?
It was.
It was?
It was substantially mentioned in my platform and on my website.
I'm interested in that because I'm reading one part of your website, at least that which is still there. Altogether, I've dedicated thousands of hours to putting on great events and understanding complex budget documents and to talk to classes. So far, all of it has been volunteer work. As you can see, I do this because I love it, not because I want to become a career-oriented, double-talking politician. I don't see anything in that major piece on your platform about UPasses. Why not?
May I ask which website that was on?
This is on your website, your URSU website.
My campaign website is not the ursu.ca website. Thank you.
I see. You submitted that document to URSU, though, correct?
We should remember this is exchange of ideas, not a debate.
Well, I'm not debating, but I'm interested in the statement that said we are confident that our students will vote for the UPass this winter. What's the major issue on campus right now? If you had to pick one issue among students, what would it be?
Parking.
Ahead of tuition?
Believe it or not, I conducted a survey during my campaign of 550 students. Of the respondents, 280 of them said that parking was their #1 issue, while only 120 said that tuition was their number one issue on our campus.
I think that that would come as a surprise to the administration and indeed to the national executive of the Students' Union of the country. Let me go on to something else. You talk in your presentation about the deal. You say the city plans to benefit $1.6 million annually, I believe. How do you arrive at that figure?
Currently, $400,000 worth of Students' Union student rate bus pass revenue is generated through our offices at the Students' Union. We have created an initial proposal and have been speaking with members of the city in a rough sort of way to work out the financial aspect of this proposal. And current preliminary rates for no change in service propose an increased revenue for the city of around $1.2 million to a total of $1.6 million in revenue for the city from students.
Two questions coming forward out of that. One is, what projected ridership are you basing this on?
The projected ridership is unimportant for that number. It's based on the membership of the Students' Union, which is currently 14,000 people, a projected opt-out rate of around 4,000 of those students, and then the remainder of that, those students being charged the flat rate UPass fee.
And the opt-out rate, who are you projecting will opt out?
Out-of-town students, students whose needs aren't met by the transit system, and resident students.
What about students who live within walking distance of the university?
Those students wouldn't currently be included because we are hoping, as we said today, to improve service to other parts of the city, that those students could be benefited.
So students within walking distance of the university wouldn't be allowed to opt out under this scheme, is that right?
The intent was to use one of those buses to create an expanded Route 18, I believe, on the south side of the city, which would act as a shuttle service for those students that live within 5 minutes, 10 minutes during the summer, but who have to walk through snowbanks and minus 40-degree weather in the winter.
I see. Mr. Vandenberg, do you belong to an organization called RPIRG? That's the umbrella organization for your Regina Green Ride.
Yes, that's correct.
Isn't it? I just noticed on its website, every full-time and part-time student at the U of R pays $5 fees. It goes to RPRG, and every student has the option of opting out of paying this fee should the student wish to do so. It's your money, and it's your right to decide who has access to it. You don't apply that philosophy to compulsory bus passes, do you?
Well, we have the opt-out as part of it. However, we are going to accomplish this by the referendum, so students do indeed have a voice in that.
May I add that no student has opted out of RPIRG in the last 3 years?
Perhaps they're not concerned about $5. You mentioned this is the other aspect of the financial model you're building. The revenues you're referring to, are they gross revenues or net revenues?
Gross.
Now, you've been talking about some fee that would be negotiated. That fee is a heavily subsidized fee compared to normal bus pass fares that students would pay. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So the more people that take advantage of it, the greater the city subsidy is. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. One other set of questions, Your Worship, if I might briefer. You say you worked with city councilors and city transit to negotiate a deal. You've said that in your presentation today, and I also noticed you say something similar on your website. It can't be correct that you're negotiating with city councilors to negotiate a deal. City councilors aren't authorized to do such a thing. Do you want to rephrase that?
City officials would be more accurate, and it's not a deal, obviously, until we have your approval.
Right. So can you describe to me so no negotiation with city councilors, which I understand.
Yes.
Can you describe to me what the nature of the negotiations with the administration are?
Early proposal stages, I would say, at this point. We've laid out a potential costing for it to maintain regular levels of service, current levels of service, as well as several expanded options which would provide different levels of services expanded upon the base, obviously at a greater cost to the students. Those negotiations are ongoing.
And am I right that there's been no commitment made to you in any sense by the City of Regina?
Absolutely not.
And do you expect any commitment to be made to you before this referendum, if it supposedly happens?
I would hope that we could reach that point. but I'm not familiar enough with the structures of the city to guarantee that.
I see. And it's your proposition that even without knowing whether or not the referendum would pass, you're asking us tonight to commit, I believe, $6 million in buses, plus whatever expenses are associated with hiring extra drivers and running the system. You're asking us to commit to that ahead of the referendum taking place.
I would say as a general comment just on increasing service to the city in general, which I believe that the next delegate will be talking about as well. The idea being that simply increasing bus fares, for example, is not enough to keep up with the demands of the city. So the comment where we are asking for the city to pledge to having more buses on the streets is more a response to the general needs of public transit in this city, and also to keep up with what we believe will be a largely increased ridership because of students riding the bus, because we do not think that if the UPass goes through and is implemented, that the current the transit system in Regina will be able to keep up with that.
And you're not worried that if the UPass vote does not go through, which history suggests it might not, you're not worried the city, having committed this expenditure, will be stuck with a bunch of buses and a bunch of expenditure that there'd be no use for?
I think that the city would benefit greatly from a very much so improved transit system.
I want to call this to order just for a moment. I know that...
One further question, if I might, Your Worship, and then I'll stop.
I just wanted to say this, though, that the debate is not about UPass in the substance of the report before us. I know that's part of the delegation, so I've allowed a lot of leeway here, so if we can move it back into the main issue, it would be helpful.
Well, I just have one further question. I didn't raise this, they did. What happens if students vote for a UPass and then the year after vote against a UPass?
It's very challenging. The legwork has been going on for a year, and will continue within the next 6 months to secure the signatures required for to bring a question of this matter to referendum. So, it's certainly possible, but I would say that based on my research of similar situations in students' unions across the country, the odds of that happening are fairly low. Once a group gets a UPass, they tend to stick with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you.
Thank you for answering those questions. Councilor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, David and Devin, for coming tonight. I was one of the councillors that sat in on some meetings to listen to the ideas, and I think this is one of those good ideas that might take some time to put in place, but that has a lot of prospects to make transportation for students and for our transit system better. And 2 councillors sat at the table to just listen, and members of the transit administration were also there. So we talked about a lot of ideas, and one of the things that I would ask you is, what are some of the things we talked about that have changed since 2009 that you think made this worth all the time and effort you've put in on it?
Thank you. I believe there's a lot that has changed since 2009, so I do not think it is fair to compare it to 2009. We've also mentioned we've already mentioned the loss of over 400 stalls. I know we've gone between 300, 400, and the number 600 lost stalls has been floating around. It's around 400 that have been lost permanently to that residence that's being currently built, as well as 200 stalls currently while the residence is being built because of the construction zone. So 600 stalls are currently lost, and those will not all be regained when the residence is complete. Another large thing that has changed is the general atmosphere of the university and the support by administration. As Devin already mentioned, the Students' Union is on board, which was not the case in 2009, and that leadership of the URSU back then also was more of a vocal voice against it, largely because students were not on board. So they were speaking for their students at that time, but Devin and the other members of the URSU are speaking on behalf of students that are in favor of it. Also, the university administration, as you know, Tom Chase was sat in on a lot of these meetings as well, and so the university is is, while they cannot provide any monetary support for it, they are in support of the UPass as well on campus. Parking services increased. There's been increased fares for parking since 2009 as well.
4% a year.
4% a year, which is also going to continue going up. Not to mention the increasing cost of owning a vehicle, gas, maintenance. These are all costs that students are bearing the brunt of. So, Devin, you have anything else on that?
Also notable is the cost of tuition that's increased by roughly $800 to $900 since 2009, with the implications for that on the student's bottom line.
Okay, and since 2009, the city has instituted parking enforcement around the university, and so that, do you think that may have reduced some of the parking spaces as well?
Definitely, I think parking is a huge issue with students. I mean, even with parking fees going up downtown, students are looking for more reasons to leave their car at home. I think that now more than ever is a time that UPass will be voted on by students.
One of the things we talked about at that meeting was students turned it down in the past, and perhaps they didn't realize all of the implications of it. And so the student union said they pledged a campaign to inform students and talk to students. Can you share anything with us as to how you've reached students and tried to tell them what might be possible?
What we've done so far is just talking to students. We put a table out by the bus stop, and we've had volunteers sitting there talking to students. We've actually given a fair amount of feedback to the Regina Transit System based on students' concerns. We've handed out a bunch of little slips that students have returned, and those have gone to Regina Transit in an effort to identify what needs students have and what their frustrations are with the current system. So in the past 6 months, the effort has mostly been talking to students, and the plans are to increase, to have an advertising campaign to increase awareness. It's an education campaign, actually, of what actually will go into the UPass. One of the complaints in 2009 from students in reports that we've read from that time, and just talking to students who were around during that referendum, was that the information, the details of the UPass were not clearly relayed to students. One of the big advertising campaigns at that time was around the lines of environmentalism, which students did not relate with. It was basically, take the bus, vote for the UPass because it's a good thing to do, as to decrease your environmental impact. But what it didn't do was give concrete details to students about the specifics of the UPass. I talked to students as well who didn't even know that they were able to opt out of that UPass. So yes, the numbers are harsh in 2009, 5 years ago, but a lot of those students were misinformed, and that is going to be a lot different this time around as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Welcome. First off, thanks, you survived surely the most thorough cross-examination this chamber's seen in the last couple of years, so thanks to Councillor Hawkins for that too. Just wondering if you have any questions of administration you'd like to ask.
They can ask questions, but they won't get answers.
Is there anything that you would like me to ask of administration? Thanks.
I guess regarding the implementation of a UPass, if we do vote for it this winter, what is administration required, or I don't know if required is the right term to use, in response to our successful UPass vote?
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Are there questions of delegation? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Gentlemen, good evening. I'm not asking about UPass, okay? So I'm going to go on to a little different. A few years ago, some other people from the university came and they talked to us about transit and so on. At the time, they were joined by at least a gentleman, as I recall, from SIAS. Can I ask you, have you ever consulted with them or talked about them? Because give or take, you're only a short ride away.
Yeah, we tried to enter in discussions with SIAST and invite them to the preliminary meetings that we had with city officials. And we did not receive any responses. We tried many times to contact them. And the kind of results for people that had worked with SIAST and other cooperative measures kind of suggested that this would be something that a conversation that could be had after. Okay. But yes, it's something that is definitely on the table, and we hope to continue speaking to SIAST in order to increase that base ridership.
Thanks very much. So when you talk about transit and you talk about enhancing transit or promoting transit, really it's the promotion part I'm interested in. You are clearly students. What about the faculty? Do you ever have discussions with them about that, and where do they come from on that? And which I would also apply, by the way, to SIAST faculty, but I'll let you handle that as you wish.
Yeah, and I would say we could even expand that to include the staff of the research park right next door to the university. There has been some interest from individual members of the faculty, but we've really tried to concentrate our efforts this year on the student body because as much as I'd like to think I'm capable of coordinating a multi-union campaign, I'm not quite there yet.
Okay.
I can add, though, that while we've been talking to students, we've had several staff members, faculty, approach us and ask if there would be a possibility of joining part of the UPass negotiations and extending that fee to professors and faculty so that they can also be a part of that.
Thanks very much. So one of the comments you made in your presentation is about time. With 14,000 students, I'm assuming you all don't go to school from 8:30 to 1 or something like that. So give me an idea from at least your perspective about real hours of operation where there are, in fact, a bulk of humanity going back and forth in the building, if I could.
So I'll give you the quick version. The Center for Continuing Education is the university's external to regular business hours program. And it's expanded in the range of, I believe, 60% over the last 4 years, very significantly, anyways. And the impact is courses like You Are Early, which start as early as 7:30 in the morning, as well as a very much expanded array of programming that's offered after 5:30 p.m., with the latest classes ending around 10 p.m. So it's very typical. I work long hours in my office. It's very typical for me to see anywhere from 50 to 100 students still sitting around in Riddell Center at 9:30 p.m. when I'm leaving. The demands, the peak times have changed significantly.
What about Saturday?
There's also programming being offered on Saturday, and I think it's an area that I've very recently heard the director of the Center for Continuing Education say that he'd like to expand to, because our university would like to continue expanding, and we don't have the facilities to do it during the week. So Saturdays, that's a very opportune time for students, perhaps like myself, that are working a full-time job while going to school.
Thanks. So remembering I'm not talking about UPass, can you describe to me anything that you're doing or that is common practice or that the university does or whatever on campus that actually promotes, besides us, by the way, that actually promotes the use of public transit?
The Students' Union has independently taken several measures to sort of improve the accessibility of transit, better promotion of the fact that we sell transit passes, as well as placing TVs in key areas that show Transit Live and the programming there. We've also engaged in a number of ad campaigns, marketing over the past year to promote the use of transit. Brooke Patterson, myself participating in Transit Week, and engaging students on social media in that way. From the institution side, their emphasis has been more on sustainability. They've increased, in fact, created a carpooling designation that gives priority parking to those who carpool. But that has come at the expense of other students' spots, because they just redesignated some of the old spots, which means that your average student is walking further than ever.
Okay. Last question. So if I'm new to the U of R and I walk in on orientation time, does anybody hand me something on transit?
Not yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dowell. Councilor Bryce?
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify, because there's lots of numbers that have been thrown out. So there's 14,000 students, but 25% can opt out, leaving about 10,000 students. Can anybody opt out? Because that's sort of, you also made the comment that people didn't understand it when it was voted. They didn't realize you could opt out. So is there a choice given whether you can opt out, or is it only in those specific situations that you told us about? Because it wasn't clear to me.
So obviously the clauses for exactly who can and will be able to opt out is varied. The 14,000 student number is probably slightly inflated over who actually takes classes and is on the University of Regina campus proper. And so we've adjusted that downward slightly to around 13,000 due to people taking classes through regional colleges that would be considered to be University of Regina students while being located in Athabasca or in Yukon. Now, we've also accommodated a number of students that live out of town that commute daily, whether from Moose Jaw or somewhere closer than that. And then we've also projected a conservatively high on that number to sort of give us a buffer zone, because we don't know exactly how those clauses are going to look yet.
Right. And I heard that the first time you said it, but I also heard you guys also say the reason the vote didn't go through last time is people didn't understand that you could opt out. So are you going to make it clear that you can opt out, but only in the circumstances?
I would intend to, absolutely. When we create the campaigns around the promotion of the referendum, we will now be playing a sort of a fact providing role. That's our intent.
Okay, you also threw out the numbers $1.2 to $6 million, or $1.2 to $1.6 million, but it also didn't take into the effect of the cost of the buses and operating them, which would be $6 million. So it would actually be a loss to the city, not a profit, is sort of how you made it sound. Am I correct?
It would be an increase in revenues, and as we know, the bus system isn't and isn't expected to become a revenue-generating service. Now, if in our wildest dreams, as they always teach you in business school, ask high, we were to get all of the buses that we had asked for, then it would certainly come at a net loss to the city. However, I think that with the massively increased revenue, an increase of 4 times that we would see from a UPass that would be coming to the city from students, we could certainly justify some significant increases in transit spending.
So what would you say to a resident in my area who says, I can't afford that extra $5 million for buses for university students? What would you say, how would I respond to that?
I would suggest to them that they could benefit from it too. Students live in the same places as seniors, and buses go to all those places.
So I think what Devin is trying to get at is, as we try to get more students on the buses, we hope to see reciprocal reaction from the city to increase services to those areas. For example, during Councillor Fraser's Week of Transit this year, he identified several bus routes 2, 4, and 21 that have had to leave students. These are big student lines. They've had to leave people at the bus stops because the buses have been full. So even in the report that is being delivered to the city today in regards to the transit fare, one of the main things in there says to increase the cost recovery, we have to get more people on the bus. So we are trying to bring an entirely new generation to transit to increase its need, to increase its usage in the city of Regina, and force the city's hand a little bit on an issue that is leaving students and senior citizens potentially stranded.
But you're also asking us to gamble $6 million when the UPass hasn't passed a referendum vote. Am I correct?
Correct.
We're actually straying from the report that's before us.
I'll just leave it at that then. Thank you.
I don't want to get into debate of that. Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much for answering questions. You can return to the gallery. And if I could have a motion to accept CP 14-15. This is from John Klein. Councilor Young, seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Before I turn the microphone over to Councilor Flanagan for this report, just want to mention the obvious, that while the delegation talked about U-Passes, that isn't the subject of the report before us tonight. It is about only proposed fare increase from 2015 to 17. So just please temper your comments accordingly. I know that they're connected, but let's stick to the issue at hand, which is the fare increases from 15 to 17. Councillor Flagle? You want the Councillor Hawkins, you want to introduce the report? You're on the committee? Or if Councillor Flagle was not there.
Your Worship, thank you very much. I'd like to move the report, the Community and Protective Services Committee report of September 3rd. It outlines in Appendix A fare increases to be implemented effective January 1. It sets out the model on which those fare increases are to be based, and it sets out the amendments to the bylaws that support those fare increases. To put this in the briefest of terms, the administration may want to comment on this. The percentage of revenue for our transit has not the percentage of revenue from the cash box, the fare box, has not kept pace with the costs of transit. The fare increase has not happened for a number of years, and it's simply necessary to have a fare increase to ensure that we have enough funding for our transit system, and that the proportion to be paid between the fare box and the subsidy from the city is maintained.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. The seconder for the report. Someone seconded? Councillor Hinks. Speakers I have so far are Councillor Murray and Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and I appreciate all the debate, and it was important for us to get a better, for me, to get a better handle, because unfortunately I don't sit on the Community Protective Services Committee, but I did have one question that came from a bus driver who I happened to be engaged with in a conversation, and he had asked me about the idea of having just a flat rate for the fare box. Now, I understand I don't fully grasp all of that, but I'm assuming fare box, you got to jump in, you got to have your change correctly, and away you go. But if you have a student ID, does that give you a different fare than if you're a regular rider? So do you get a different fare? So I'm a student, so I've got my post-secondary ID. Do I get a different fare than if I'm just another adult getting on the bus?
Mr. John Wright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, you would.
Okay, so has there been thought given to the idea of having just a single flat rate, so you don't, because according to the driver, you stand there for a few minutes trying to figure out where my ID is so I can prove that I'm actually a student, and in the meantime, just keep a flat fare. Everybody gets on, same price, where they go. Has there been thought to that, or would that simply marginalize those that maybe that's the reason why we have multiple fares and different amounts? But thoughts around the idea of a flat fare?
Mr. Ron Wright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer that to Mr. Looning, our business manager.
Thank you.
Mr. Looning?
We have looked at that in the past. Primarily, we do like to have different fees for different user groups. We have some individuals that may be on social assistance that may not be able to afford a full price or a flat price across the board. So we do have variations in that regard.
Okay, I appreciate it, Your Worship. That was the only question, and I did promise this driver that I would ask the question and bring it forward. I appreciate the amount of work and time and effort that goes into putting these proposals together, so I wouldn't anticipate making a change to them at this point. But thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. To the notion of a fair increase, I want you to know that I am in favor, and we'll speak toward that. But I find that it might be useful to talk about investment or how things have changed in the last number of years. First of all, I do recall very vividly a group of young people that came before us at Community Protective Services initially and then at Council to talk about bus service both to university and at the time to SIAS. And I thought Council was very receptive. At the time, though, I also recall that we had a fleet that was probably among the oldest in Canada, and my memory says it was plus 11 years on average. You'll note that there is a report before us today about purchasing more new buses, and that would put our fleet in the category of about average 5.5 years. So to the capital component and to fleet, that has changed significantly, and I think that speaks volumes considering they're all low floor and shiny and nice and reliable. I also will point out that at the time that we had this first delegation and we first considered the, at that time, express routes, of which there were 4. We also received federal funding for transit. We no longer receive that and have not for a number of years. So in fact, that investment in capital has come from this community, which I would say speaks volumes. So there's that part. The other part that happened at that time was the students said, we really need some express routes, and northeast and south and so on. And we immediately, as close as the media can be, within months, actually put 4 routes together. And truly, with no questions asked. And at the time, we had great fanfare. What happened later was that they weren't used, and they weren't used to the point where we had to pull some of those routes. Now, I say that knowing full well that the run from the north is still alive and well, has been adjusted by our staff well, and so that works. The next thing that happened was we had this thing, magic little card called the R card, that actually allows our staff to track and know which routes are being used, which stops are being used, and so on. And they've done, I think, an admirable job of changing those routes so that transit ridership has increased in a number of areas. But also they can amend it as we go. As the report states, we don't have lots of information over many years, but we have reliable information now. I can tell you that I get calls, as all councillors probably do, on transit, and we have adjusted where shelters should be. We've adjusted a number of things in terms of service and so on. So while I understand that everybody wants more, I think we have to reflect a little bit that we have in fact invested, and in fact some very good people have put a lot of effort into trying to make things better. And there's been capital dollars that are there. And again, I say, later on today, we have the option of not just buying 6 buses, but putting them on a quicker order so that we're fine. So to the notion of investment, I think we've done very well. I'm going to tell you I struggle with one thing, and I struggled with this my whole time on council. The arguments that are made in this report about why we have public transit are all solid and all are very good. I don't have any trouble with us making sure that transit is accessible and that it is available at a reasonable cost to people. But I have a great deal of difficulty understanding at what level, as a user, I should invest and pay a portion of, and at what point we as a community should in fact be covering the cost. And so you can see that a few years ago it was at 33% recovery rate. I don't know if that's very good, but to me that sounds very low. I don't know if 45% is an aspirational level, but I often look at 50-50. When we talk about partnerships, and we've done that on this floor, we've talked about how and who should commit to a number of things. So I think somewhere along the way we need to have as a community the notion of how much do we invest as users, how much do we invest to make sure that it is there, and how much does the community invest to make sure it's accessible. I think that's a debate worth having. So while 45 is in there, I suggest to you that is a number that we need to come to grips with. I'm very happy with the information that's here. I'm very happy with the gentlemen who would come forward and state their view. And I think this is a great public debate to have in terms of what we're going to do. But I am not at this time prepared to invest differently until I see some results in terms of the path that was accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the week before last, I parked my car and I took part in something called the Transit Week Challenge, where I rode the bus for a whole week, challenged other people around the city to do the same. My motivation was to gain a better first-hand perspective for this conversation here tonight, also to encourage new people to actually try transit, people that might otherwise enjoy it but haven't had the motivation to try it, and also to gather feedback on this important conversation from people who already use transit. So, boy, did I really receive a lot of feedback, that's for sure. First off, starting with the good news, what's working with transit. The last council had the foresight to invest in our fleet. So in 2010, there was money put aside to renew the fleet. And one of the big success stories with Regina Transit is actually we have a very healthy fleet. The fleet that we have as of this year, all of them are the new style of buses, low-floor buses. That's not the case in many other like-sized Canadian cities, so we should be proud of that. Another thing that's working, express roads. Regina now has 3 express roads. We have a bus that runs all the way from Superstore in the East End to downtown, one that runs from Rochdale to the university, and one that goes back and forth up and down Albert. All of the feedback I've heard about this is really brimming. People are really excited about the express routes, and it really works for people. So good news for that, too. Our ridership numbers are a big success. Combined total for the past 2 years is a combined increase of 12%. Ridership has been up between 2012 and 2013. And this year we're on track for an additional 9% increase in ridership. So that means by the end of 2014, transit will have issued 6.6 million rides. Hard to believe, but really 6.6 million rides. A lot of people riding transit in the city. A bit of good news about things to come. This fall, Regina is partnering with Google to introduce Google Transit here in Regina. It's a service I've been able to use in other cities while taking the bus. And it's going to be a big improvement here. In essence, you have a Google map on your laptop or desktop or your phone, and I can't think of something more intuitive to find out your bus route. So I think that's going to be a big improvement and remove a barrier for a lot of people who are otherwise intimidated to find out their stop with our current trip planner, which Transit Live, really good. Main Regina, we should be proud of that. Our trip planner, if not Main Regina, we should be proud of that too. Another good thing that's going to come is heated bus stops, actually. This fall, the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District, partnering with Transit, is going to put up 4 heated bus stops. What a great idea. I think it'll be the envy of many other northern cities, not just in Canada, but around the world. And I think we'll soon look back and think, how did we do this before heated bus stops? Surely Regina has winter for about 9 months of the year, and most of our transfers happen right on 11th Avenue, so I think this will be a very good thing for transit use. So now to get to the list of maybe some of the holes in our system, I would first like to say that
You were going to relate to the discussion on the fare increases. That's really what we're talking about.
Okay.
Is fare increases.
Thanks for that. I do plan to support the fare increase, but I also think that it has to be conditional somehow on making our transit system better. So some of the negative feedback that I've heard about our transit system, definitely frequency is an issue. We only have buses once an hour on Sundays and in the evenings. Overcrowdedness, again, 3 routes this year that have had to miss people because their bus is just full. It's a good type of problem, but it certainly is a problem we have to address. Service to new neighborhoods. There's several new neighborhoods that have no service whatsoever. We don't have service to the airport. Stat service, we have about 5 stat holidays where there's no service at all. And yeah, I guess that's, where do we start? There's a couple issues that I would really like to see us take care of through this year's budgeting process. Number one is service on stat holidays. There's about 30,000 people in Regina who use an R card this year. That doesn't include people who pay with cash or who pay with a 10 card, a disposable card. Many of those people, when it comes to the 5 or 6 stat holidays where there's no service, they're simply stranded. People have to work. People might have to get to the doctor. People might want to go downtown for Canada Day. And right now, they just can't do it. There's no service whatsoever. The cost for us to run, to me, this is sort of a low-hanging fruit. The cost of us to run stat service on one stat holiday is about $22,000. The increase we're going to see next year by raising fees is going to be $1.5 million. So compare that $1.5 million that we're going to have for new income versus $22,000 to run stat service. To me, that seems like a very, like I say, low-hanging fruit is something that we should jump on. We should be offering service every day of the year. Another issue is monthly passes for seniors. Right now, seniors have to buy their passes in either 6-month or 1-year intervals. I'm told from Transit it would be no problem for us to offer it on a monthly basis. I think that's something we should do. The increase is going to be 50% for senior passes if it passes tonight. So that's a significant increase for many seniors who are on a fixed income. So to me, those are 2 easy fixes. In the long term, ultimately, it's about expanding our fleet is what it takes to really hit those key areas. The U-Pass, I think, certainly is, we have to look at as an opportunity. We can get down in the weeds about, I think I have about a minute and a half.
You got about 2 or 3 seconds, actually. You've done 5 minutes.
I hate to get down in the weeds. Ultimately, it'll be up to URSU to decide how the referendum goes. But if they come to us saying we would like to take part in a U-Pass, I think it's our obligation to see that as the opportunity is and to have our services ready to jump on that. It's not just about the fact that U-Passes universally increase the cost recovery ratio right away. It also means that
we're getting beyond the scope of the report. I understand your comments. We'll get to that at a certain time.
Okay, I'll wrap up here. Okay. It's also investment in the future of getting young people off of campus and turning a generation of people into transit riders. So with that note, my one question was just from our presenters here about what does the city need to do to be in a position if next year the Students' Union has a vote and is ready to implement a U-Pass, what do we need to do to be ready for that? Thanks.
I'm going to say that question doesn't need to be answered because it's hypothetical and it's not part of the report, Councilor Fraser. Honestly, we can get to that point, but tonight it's about fare increases in 2015, 2017. Thank you. Councilor Bryce.
Thank you. In going through the report, I just wanted to briefly talk about the discounted bus pass, because I know people talk about the affordability, and I know that we have this discounted bus pass, and I kind of know how it works, but I know that with the increase, it might change the ratio that's there. So can we just explain what the discounted bus pass is, who uses it, and how it's split up, just so people understand that?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The discounted bus pass is used by people on social assistance and seniors, so it's subsidized. If we use the future model, it would be $25, $25, and $25 moving forward.
$25 the province, $25 the city, and $25 by the user.
Correct.
Mr. Onright?
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
So can you go back
Okay.
to your question again, Councillor?
The report says that in 2017, the city's cost would be approximately $40. Is that still going to divide it equally between the other two as well? Or are we looking at taking a bigger chunk of it?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that will be divided equally in the current model.
Okay. Have we talked to the provincial government to let them know that there is an increase in this, and what is their response?
Through you,
Mr.
Mr. Mayor? Yes, we have. Yes. We have.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure of that. And in going through the report also, I know Councillor Murray asked about post-secondary in the coin box versus regular adult. To me, it seems that there's an adult rate and a youth rate. It doesn't look like there's a post-secondary cash box rate. The post-secondary comes with a pass. Am I correct?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I maybe didn't explain that properly.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Burnett?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd like to thank the delegations, too, for coming forward and helping us debate. One of the things I'd just like to share, I think, as being a new councillor into the fold, but the last budget process and our current budget process, that I can reassure that transit is certainly one of those areas that's a high priority of this council, and I think it's one that has considerable debate and discussion. And I think the proposal before us tonight on the fare increase is just one component in the mix of, I think, trying to find part of the solution. I think for when I read the report and the analysis from administration that I think was mentioned earlier, that understanding the necessity of having to subsidize transit, I think, is well expressed in the report. I don't think there's anybody would contest that feeling. And I think, as Councillor O'Donnell had mentioned, coming down to the number of 45%, how do we get to that number is probably where I'm a little shaky. But looking in the background analysis, they talk about a 2009 8-column report, an engineering transportation study, where they actually looked at most of the other comparable sized cities as well as cities in Western Canada. That seems to be a close benchmark of where you want to raise or reach. One of the other items that I noticed in the report, that we haven't had a fare increase since 2010. And when I look at the cost of operating our transit system, everything from fuel has gone up 39.3%, maintenance up about 29%, overall operating costs up 13%. So costs are continually rising just to maintain the current existing levels. So there are real challenges, and I know nobody likes the rate increase, but I think a lot of the analysis and the arguments that have been put forward by administration, I think, provide so far for me one of the best sort of arguments I think we have to move forward on the rate increase. And when you do look at a lot of the comparisons to the other city, Regina is still very low compared to many of the others. And I think because of some of these arguments, I certainly will be supporting the rate increase.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Other speakers? Councillor Flagel? You didn't introduce, sorry. You didn't introduce the motion. You're the chair. Would you introduce? So go ahead.
No. I was away on other city business, so I couldn't be here. So two things I have. Cost recovery today versus cost recovery if this is approved is how much different?
Mr. Onright?
Or going to be if we hit the numbers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the cost recovery may improve slightly. The ask for the fare increase is to maintain current service.
Okay.
And I think if you refer back to Councillor O'Donnell's comments about the investment that's been made over the last 4 years. And moving forward, it's to maintain those operational costs on the money that has been spent in the past.
Okay. So if I could, going in that question, what costs have gone up that we need to raise the prices just to maintain service? What have we done in the last 3 years and spent to have to say now increase the fares to keep the cost recovery at the same numbers? Like, have we spent $1 million, $5 million, $10 million over the last 4 years? I don't know. What's our number?
John Wright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So over the last 4 years, on the capital side, there have been 43 new buses.
43?
43 put into the fleet, all low floor, all air conditioned.
Okay.
There have been 3 small unit buses that have been used on some test routes. So small buses, less money, however, have operational costs with them.
Okay.
Transit Live has been added, the GPS system to the fleet. Cameras have also been added to ensure passenger safety. And additional service in Harbor Landing has been added, and the express routes have also been added.
If I could, on average, how much is one bus?
One bus is around $550,000.
So we've invested over $200 million. No, 200.
About
44 times 500,000. Well, he's
Mr. Ronway can do the math for you.
Yeah.
Do the math for you.
Please.
Approximately $22 million.
22 million. Wow, that's pretty good. What do we need for expenditures going forward, say the next 2-3 years? And will the fare increase we have allow us to possibly look at 6 more buses, 10 more buses, 20 more? Because we're going to have to continually replace our fleet, right? So is this fare increase going to give us that stability of keeping the cost recovery at where it is today, or are we going to lose?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The increase will help with the replacement of the units moving forward. So the business model today, moving forward, will replace X number of buses as they come due to retire or at the end of their life cycle.
Okay.
The fare increase is not going to add service because it is there to maintain what is currently there.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Other speakers? Councillor Hawkins? You want to speak?
Should I be close to debate?
You be close to debate? Okay, well then we'll wait for a moment then. Okay. Councillor Fendura?
Thank you, Worship. I know I'm way out here in the far east.
Just raise your hand.
Yeah,
That's all
it's
you
hard
gotta
to
do.
see me. Thank you, Worship, to you. Just a quick question to the fare increases. I know it's in the report, but just to allow it, when was the last time we had an increase?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 2010.
Okay. Now, just looking at the increase in 2010, I think I've asked that question before, because I'm looking at it now as we go into the future. Our city's growing and we're expanding, and there's a pretty solid, pretty heavy kind of burden, not a burden, but a request on providing the faster, better, go further out service. When we had that increase, what was the feedback from the citizens? Just kind of give me an idea of what was the feedback from the citizens. Was everybody upset? Did we lose ridership? Did we gain? What was the psyche of how the citizens of Regina looked at what we're doing with that increase that we're asking for? Through you, Worship.
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer that to Mr. Looning.
Mr. Looning?
Through you, the Mayor. Obviously, whenever there's a fare increase, there is some hesitation or not wanting to have to pay for that extra service. But during that time, we actually implemented the electronic fare boxes, and we got a greater idea of what our ridership was doing. And we have only seen increases in ridership since 2010.
Okay. Thank you. Your Worship, just if you allow me a couple comments. I've kind of thought about things and struggled a little bit with the, listening to our seniors and listening to students and listening to individuals that are fixed income, trying to put put pennies together to take a ride on a bus. But when you look at the bigger picture, if we don't continue, if we don't invest, we are always asked for a better service, better quality service, further, faster. I feel that if we don't increase it, I think we are going backwards. So when you look at the 37% or the 45% ratio, I can see that it's a within the increase in each year for 3 years. I look at it, it is a little bit of a burden, but when you think about our transit is getting better. We are asked to go further. So the question to that is, as we say to the citizens, you're going to have a better ride. You're going to have a better experience. You're going to go further. We're going to take you where you really want to go. So this is what my question is, reinvesting into transit. It's one thing about raising fares, but my question would be this. There's a couple $1 million from this. What are we doing with that? Where is it going to? Are we reinvesting it back into the transit as we see it to make sure that the ridership is citizens who experience it well? They have a good satisfaction that the money that they're spending is going into the quality of the transit that we're providing. So, question, is the money going directly to transit, or are we doing something else with it? Through your worship.
Mr. Enright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The money is staying within transit. As I noted earlier, it is going to be used to maintain the existing service. And I think if you look over the past 4 years and the investment that's made in transit to bring it forward and create that base to make it better in the future, those funds are required to maintain that current service level that people seek today.
Okay, thank you for that. Your Worship, then I feel comfortable saying that I'm supporting the increase, because I'm hearing that the funds are going right back into what it's all for. So, Your Worship, I'm supporting the increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ferdera. You want to comment?
Mr. Chair,
Schulberg,
just to
go ahead.
supplement Mr. Enright's answer, there's two elements in terms of the funding for transit. Of course, Council makes budget decisions overall with the revenue pool available. At the same time, there is funding in the budget to cover the current level of transit service. So those things go together. There is funding to cover the current service levels, but revenues overall are allocated by City Council at a higher level.
Thank you, Mr. Schulberg. Other questions before I give it over to Mr. Councilor Hawkins to close debate? Any other speakers? Councilor Burnett, if you could take the chair, please.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Burnett. Very good debate tonight, a very passionate debate, and I want to thank the delegations for their comments and questions by members of council, because this is an important service we provide for all citizens. And I want to begin my comments by saying the transit system is a good system. It's working well, but we have to improve it. No question about that. And that's what we've been doing. This past council and this council has invested, as you heard, millions of dollars in new equipment. We've changed our routes to express routes to increase ridership, and those numbers are there. I'd like to ask the administration if they can tell me the increase in ridership over the last 3 years.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So 12% over the prior 2 years and 9% anticipated for this year.
That's a good number. That's a good increase. I think we should all understand that what's working here, the strategy is working. And I want to thank the administration for that strategy and this council for keeping this important element in front of us for growth in the future. I want to talk about cost recovery, and I know that's been raised before, and I'd like to just understand from the administration perspective, where the report talks about 45% recovery, and just how we got to that number and what's the rationale for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The 45% number came out of the Transit Investment Plan that was presented by AECOM, and it was taken through a study of municipalities across Canada, similar size. And Regina is very much on the lower end of the cost recovery when compared to those cities.
So that is seen as a bit of a benchmark for municipalities, about a 45% recovery rate. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay. So that engenders another discussion about all of our services that we have, that we provide the public. What's our rationale for subsidy for that? Those accessibility, recovery of cost are important issues, not just for transit, but for other services, recreation facilities as one example. I want to just quickly talk about the issue of Google versus Transit Live. Councilor Fraser made a comment I wasn't aware of. We have not approved Google as a way to provide information on transit services in the city. We are studying that. We have not made any recommendation yet in front of this council, just to be clear. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay.
And
I do know that the Transit Life has been effective. Whether it's the most effective way to promote the usage, I don't know that. Last point I'll make is I support the recommendation because I do believe very strongly we're hitting a benchmark that is seen around the country and around Western Canada as a benchmark for cost recovery. We haven't seen an increase since 2010. This is fair, reasonable. The report we get on later on talks about buying 6 more buses, low-platform buses, in advance capital, to continue to improve our system. We're making step-by-step improvements, and I think this is a very good continuation of the trend of increasing ridership and being more relevant to residents. Thank you. Councillor Hawkins, to close debate.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. 5 points in under 30 seconds. 1, no increase since 2010. 2, Councillor O'Donnell's point and others, investment needs to be taking place constantly. We've done a good job on that, particularly the low-floor buses. 3, I urge Council and administration to look at Google Transit. I've had recommendations from my constituents on that, indicating how effective it is. 4, this moves us in the right direction in terms of cost recovery ratios. And 5, I think the administration has done a very good job on presenting a solid business case here. And I think when we're dealing with transit, we always have to keep in mind if we want a sustainable system, there has to be a solid business case to back it up. So I urge support for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. That closes the debate, so I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Brennan, if you want to go back to bylaw 2014-67.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that bylaw number 2014-67 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Fundura, that bylaw number 2014-67 be read a second time.
Any comments on the bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that Council hereby consent to bylaw number 2014-67 and going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We'll move on to delegation related reports. This is D 14-83. Judith Verisic. If you could identify yourself, who you represent, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Mayor Fougere and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to come here today and address you on behalf of the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. We are here today to request your support for our application for accreditation with the Main Street Saskatchewan program. The Main Street Saskatchewan program is a downtown revitalization program that is administered by the Saskatchewan Ministry of Parks, Culture and Sport. The program supplies training, technical services, and funding support for accredited members. Main Street Saskatchewan focuses on using the 4-point approach to begin a long-term reversal of trends that saw businesses and residents flocking to those suburbs in post-World War II. The 4-point approach refers to 4 areas of activity that when operating simultaneously will ensure successful, sustainable revitalization. This includes community organization, economic restructuring, marketing promotion, and design and heritage conservation. The Regina Downtown Business Improvement District will be applying for the accredited tier of the Main Street Saskatchewan program. The Main Street Regina program will be completely managed and funded by Regina Downtown. Should we be successful in our application, the ministry will provide training and additional support for the development and promotion of the Main Street brand. Accredited tier communities also receive a one-time $25,000 matching grant to support the development of a community vision and work plan. 3 additional grants can be accessed on a competitive basis. These include the Main Street Heritage Conservation Grant, which supports historic building rehabilitation, the Main Street Enhancement Grant for public realm improvements, non-historic building improvements, and event staging, and the Main Street Capacity Building Grant that provides funding for activities that enhance knowledge and skills related to the 4 points. If we are selected as a Main Street accredited community, the Main Street Regina organization would undertake projects such as, but are not limited to, walking tours, design guidelines, educational workshops, facade improvement grant program, wayfinding system, informational brochures. The formation of Main Street Regina will continue to support the implementation of the Regina Downtown Neighborhood Plan, the City of Regina Cultural Plan, the Heritage Management Strategy, and will demonstrate our shared commitment to building a strong, successful, and sustainable downtown. As such, RD-BID respectfully requests the City of Regina's support for our application to Main Street Saskatchewan and that the resolution before you is adopted. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Verisek, for your presentation. Other questions? Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Welcome. A couple things. One is this is a competitive process, true?
Through you, yes.
So just because you apply doesn't mean you're going to get it?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's put the application aside for a minute and let's dream for a second. So if it's accepted, take me 5 or 6 or 7 years in the future, what do you see?
I would like this organization to have a facade improvement grant program that we could administer for downtown businesses to improve their properties, respecting the heritage or the historic nature of a lot of the buildings downtown. I'd like a lot of the property owners to understand the importance of their building and how to maintain and enhance their buildings before tearing them down. I'd like them to be able to explore enhancing that historic flair that really, once it's torn down, is lost. And over the past 30 years, you hear about it. I hear about it all the time, how, that was such a lovely building and we tore it down. And I think through spreading the knowledge of what can be done with these historic buildings and how it can be incorporated into new developments, I think that would be really worthwhile with some of the really great stock that we do have in our downtown.
Thanks. So is there a need for an educational component for the owners of the building to understand what's available to them or what's possible?
Through you, absolutely. That is one of the items within our work plan. I just didn't itemize that in my demonstration, but yes, that is part of the work plan that we submitted to the ministry.
Thanks. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other speakers to this? Or questions, I should say? Okay, Councilor Burnett.
Thank you, Judith, for appearing this evening. That just as a comment, I am the representative on the Regina Downtown Bid Board, and I'm very impressed with the recognition that the downtown business community has for the organization. And I do believe that the combining of sort of the cultural heritage aspect into the downtown area is certainly a critical component of the long-term plan that's, I think, envisioned for the area. I think what's important too.
Do you have just a question of delegation?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't really have a question.
Okay, well, we'll have a chance to comment. I'll leave you go for it. You're getting off very lightly here. Oh, Councilor Fendera. Get that hand up higher, buddy.
I'm not just saying hi to you. I know. Good evening.
Good evening.
I know the cultural plan, but just can you give me a little more? What do you mean by cultural plan? I'm an ethnic, cultural, diverse type of person. I'd like to hear more about that. What do you mean by that? Through your worship.
Through you, the city's cultural plan, I believe, is still to be adopted formally by City Council, but it does touch on some of the cultural events and the heritage nature of our community, and it talks about bringing those cultural organizations together to work together to celebrate what we have, what we do have. This program, where it's been applied in other communities, really does that. It brings those little local grassroots groups together to celebrate the uniqueness of their community, and that's what we want to do in downtown Regina. So part of the, if we were selected as an accredited community, one of the things we would have to do is have an approved cultural plan within 5 years. So we are already ahead of the game in Regina. So we would just like to make sure that whatever the vision and work plan is for Main Street Regina, whatever it is, it would be working in concert with what the Regina Cultural Plan has already stated.
Thank you for that, Your Worship. And just to say, great job. I know that the cultural things are already happening within the downtown and your area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fendera. Other questions of delegation? You can return to the gallery, Ms. Resick. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to bring forward CR 14-106, which is the endorsement for the RBIDS application for the Main Street Saskatchewan program.
Second, Your Worship. Your mic's on.
Councilor Murray, comments on the report? Pretty straightforward. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Your Worship, should we entertain a 5-minute break?
We could do a motion for a 10-minute break.
10 minutes, sure.
Seconder, please. Councilor Young, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Back in 10 minutes, everyone. Thank you.
And Jim's hoarding all the cookies.
shouldn't.
Just so you know.
I'll take two then.
I got another. I ran out of room in my drawer.
Michael caught me off guard there. He's reading next time. Jim, I just speak next to me. Look, I'm trying to do the same thing. Okay,
No,
so-
no, I don't actually. Yeah. Thanks.
Shall we get old?
Yeah. There you go. Look at Sean. He's always right there. What a go-getter. One day when I grow up. There you go.
Those first students in Hawkins.
I was talking to Dr. Bob about that. There's a point where you want to cross examine. This is the place for it.
No, they weren't coming here for a fight. They're kind of almost on their side.
Yeah. And, I guess maybe that's the academic side, that let's do the research, make sure we have all the facts, all the figures, make sure we can. Yeah.
This is the real world. Make sure you're prepared.
Yeah, and that's, in my opinion, it's not our place to go after that. So that's unfortunate. I mean, they'll get what they ask for. If they ask for it, and they've got a cause for it, we'll give it to them. Why wouldn't we?
Oh, yeah. But the really tough part now, people want kind of 24-hour service.
Yeah, well, they want big city service, but by the time we get 300,000, we'll be able to do that, and I think we'll be able to ramp up too. We just don't have a population at this point. Now, that being said, we have a lot more, not transient, but a lot more people moving into the area that are from larger centers, where they come to expect that service. They'll demand it, they'll want it, they'll use it. Great, because frankly, when I started on council, we never had a full bus. Never, not once. So that's telling me that at least we're getting more ridership. So.
And it's tough. I'm sure that our riders and our transit plan, probably 90-95% of people need to use it. You're always going to have 5 o'clock rush when you know 2 or 3 people behind. No choice. They can lie here or like it, so I can overshop it at the store and back home. But now you're downtown, zigzag. So you can cater for special issues.
The bus isn't a taxi either. It doesn't matter where you are. It's not a taxi. It doesn't take you right where you want to go. Close, but not right where you want to go.
But since I 2 years ago,
Yeah.
a lot of discussion about buses.
There has been. Part of the growing city already.
If I could bring council back to order, please. Yeah.
Yes.
I've got to leave, yes. Order, if I could bring members of council back to, can we continue the meeting, please? Thank you, members. We'll now continue the meeting, and as I see, we're on delegation 14-84, John Klein, on the capital budget for advance approval. So, Klein, if you could come forward, tell us who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions of council afterwards.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm here representing myself. I'm John Klein. I'm a frequent transit user. I know a lot of people in this room have purchased vehicles for their own use, and not a lot of those people would ever think about buying a vehicle and then ever using it. But that's in fact what city councilors are going to be doing when they purchase these 6 buses. Several of them don't really use the transit system, and some aren't familiar with the day-to-day workings of it. So I think it's important to listen to people that use the system regularly, as well as listening, of course, to the staff who are recommending things like a fare increase and the purchase of 6 buses. But the people on staff aren't necessarily free to make the case that we need to put more tax money into the system. And that's where you need to listen to the citizens. And when citizens and councilors are saying that people are stranded at bus stops, that's something that City Council can fix by increasing the investment in transit. And it's not something that can be fixed by raising fares by a quarter, because raising the price of the bus decreases the amount of people that are willing to use it. That's just the way economics works. But if you increase the amount of money spent on the system and make it more attractive for people, then you're going to get increased usage. If you think of it as a public service as opposed to something just that what other people are using, then it's going to be something you want to support, like you want to support an effective water treatment system, and you want to support other public services. And that's just what I came here to say today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Klein, for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councilor Fraser?
Great. Thanks for your presentation. Just wondering if there's any questions you'd like asked to the admin. Thanks.
Yes, I'd like to know why only 6 replacement buses are being considered at this time, when we have an example given tonight that there's people abandoned at a stop because there's no room on the bus. Obviously, we need to add a little bit of capacity. Maybe the bus fleet that we have right now isn't sufficient for that. So how many more buses are required to stop abandoning people at stops for up to half an hour, or if it takes place on a Sunday, it would take an hour for the next bus to come along, which is unacceptable without a heated stop at even -10 temperatures.
Great, thanks.
Other questions of the delegation? Do you support the recommendation in the report?
To purchase 6 buses, I do, and I think that it should actually be doubled to purchase 12 instead, because I think there's a case for there to be more additional express routes, and I don't think juggling around the buses like was done previously to implement the previous increased express routes through a certain limited amount of days is going to cut it. I think we've got a pretty efficiently organized system, and now we need a few more buses to actually serve more routes.
So but you do support the recommendation?
At 6 buses, I don't directly support it stopping at 6. I think it needs to go beyond that. So I can't say if it would mean supporting it as it stands. It isn't as it stands, no.
Thank you. Any questions of delegation? You can return to the gallery then. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And we'll go to report 14-107. Councilor Murray?
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward this report. If I can have a seconder for it.
Seconder for it, please. Councilor Ventura?
Thanks very much, Councilor Ventura. So this is the capital budget advance approval going into the 2015 purchase, and this will be of those 6 conventional 40-foot low-floor buses. Your Worship, there's been a lot of discussion tonight about the replacement of buses and the replacement process that we have for our fleet. It wasn't that long ago that we had one of the oldest fleets in Canada. Today we have one of the newest fleets in Canada, so we're moving in the right direction. Your Worship, I'd hearken to say that it's a pretty dangerous place to go and say, I'm going to buy all new buses this year, so we have a whole new, brand new fleet. Because obviously that fleet of buses is going to wear out and need to be replaced at some point in the future. So buying buses at a reasonable amount each year allows us to be able to decommission those buses at some point in the future. Again, as a ladder effect. Anyone who has investments will know that with your investments, you ladder them. You don't buy all of your investments at one time. They come due at the same time. Now you're stuck with them. These are no different. These buses will wear out. They'll need to be replaced. And it's much cheaper and easier for us to be able to replace them with intervals like this. So there's a lot of discussion that came from the committee around this. The 2 recommendations we have is, of course, to go ahead and approve those new 6 buses coming into the new budget for 2015. So that's where the discussion went, and it's in advance of that discussion. So, Your Worship, we look for approval for the recommendations coming from committee.
And this funding is coming from the Transit Fleet Replacement Reserve.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. We have a replacement reserve that's in place specifically for this, and so this reserve money will be allocated coming out of the 2015 budget discussions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other comments on this report? It's a very good report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next report is Report 108. Councilor Burnett.
Thank you, Worship. We have before us a recommendation tonight that the City of Regina indicates support in principle in the amount of $50,000 cash grant and city services support of up to $50,000 for the Ladies Professional Golf Association 2016 Canadian Pacific Women's Open.
Thank you, Councilor Burnett. Seconder, please.
Second, Your Worship.
Okay. Comments on this report? Questions? Councilor Flagel.
Just a couple of comments, strictly from a heads and beds type of a, speaking on behalf of the Hotel Association and all the rest of the tourism and the advertising and everything, 50,000 cash and up to 50,000 in kind, which I'm not sure how that equates out to 30,000 our cost or whatever the numbers are, because I'm sure it's not 50,000 our cost, but it's a budgetary process. But the biggest thing is in 2016 is the start of the tournament, but a year prior, when they're advertising and going to the 2015 venue that they've already picked, they'll start to promote Regina in 2016. So a year prior, people of Canada, people of the golf world will know that the golf tournament, the Ladies CN Ladies Open, will be held in Regina in 2016. You put advertising on CTV for one shot, it's like $5,000. That's local. Nationally, it's probably $20,000. I don't know the number. I'm guessing at 20,000. So if you start at 2015, and probably over the next few golf tournaments, they'll mention that the next Ladies CN LPGA tournament is in Regina in 2016. That chips away at that $50,000 pretty quick, and chips away at the rest. The other thing is the delegates from exec mentioned that there's probably an 8-day window of terms of advertising and everything that goes in. There's all these corporate events that go on. There's people coming in. There's every news station. It's a worldwide event. It's probably the second, I think they said second biggest on the LPGA circuit in North America, not just Canada, in North America. So when you look at that factor and you look at all the different names that are going to be coming here, it's a big promotion for the City of Regina. We've hosted many things, Grey Cup, Tim Hortons, Scotty's, et cetera, some more amateur stuff. We just had the NAG games here. This is a big event on a short timeline, which could benefit the city hugely, and I'm looking for everybody's support, and hopefully we can get this through and put the money up front to say we're involved, and then the bid process goes forward for the LPGA, because I think they're in competition with I think it's 2 other cities at this particular 2016. So they need our support. They've got the hotel support. They've got corporate sponsorship. They've got all kinds of things. And it's just a good feeling and a good deal for the city to get involved in this on a national, worldwide stage, not just even North American. So my support is going to be on it for sure.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Good comments. Other comments on this? Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make a very quick comment to say that I think this is a great opportunity for Regina to show off the new stadium, which I think will become an iconic structure in our city. So I support this completely.
Thank you very much for that. Other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Burnett for the renewed gas tax fund agreement.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have before us CR 14109, which is a renewed gas tax fund agreement. The key recommendation states that the City Council authorize the city manager or his designate to prepare, negotiate, review, and enter into the municipal gas tax fund agreement, which allows for the transfer of federal gas tax revenue under the gas tax program.
Second for that, please. Councillor Dowell. Speakers to it? Councillor Dowell.
Thanks very much. I want to highlight a couple of very good things that are in here, give you a little information and make a couple of comments. One is that, first of all, this is the one piece of revenue source that we get from another order of government that is in legislation. And I think we should applaud that and be thankful for that. That is just real rare in this day. Second part of this, and this was what happened in the last year through serious negotiation with the federal government, is that they indexed this. So not only will it maintain its purchase power, but it will maintain its purchase power, which has not been the case. So I think those are 2 things to be applauded. You will also note that this now falls under the category of Building Canada Fund. This is the only money we're getting out of the Building Canada Fund. There are no other dollars falling our way at this point in time. And I think that's a bit of a tragedy. I will let you know that as one of your representatives on the SUMA board, I'm also placed on a committee that reviews the gas tax and how it's done in Saskatchewan. I mention that for a couple of reasons, because it has been changed in terms of what is now eligible for that money. In other words, some other fund money, I'll use recreation, has been taken away. Recreation now falls into this. The amount of money has also been diluted. So obviously, on your behalf, one of the things that we're going to do with the provincial government is talk through that and hopefully get to the federal government so they understand the impact those things have. Basically, we have a good start here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Other comments? Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would add that that one of the expanded projects that this money can be used for is planning for asset management. And since the city is doing asset management in a big way now, I think this is a really in our favor. So I will be supporting. Well, I don't have to support this, do I? Yes, I do have to support.
Yes.
I do. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other comments? I would just add this is the one program the federal government got right. Of everything else, they haven't got it right. This one they got right. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Finance Administration on reserve balances. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 14110, and this is around the reserve balances comparison, minimum, maximum, target balances. So if I can have a move or a seconder,
please.
Somebody, please.
Councillor Young.
Thanks, Councillor Young. Just to put this in perspective, this is a transfer that's going to be made into the Community Investment Reserve, the CIR, and it's going to the General Fund Reserve in the amount of $203,000, comprising of $93,000 and $110,000 respectively, that the Executive Committee and Finance Administration Committee portions of the Community Investment Reserve. Your Worship, just as a way of background, municipalities maintain reserves for a number of purposes, and those 3 main purposes would be to smooth the effect of spending decisions on the property taxation, B, to finance unexpected emergency and spending requests, and to C, minimize debt financing requirements. So, Your Worship, we have these reserves in place, and often people will think, oh, gee, the city is out there willy-nilly spending. We actually have reserves in place to do the work that we need to do for our citizens. Sometimes it's things that are emergent, sometimes we find opportunities, and here, Your Worship, this is bringing us back into those balances. We require a minimum, maximum, so we're just doing a little bit of homework there. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. This is consistent with our policy of minimum, maximum reserves and balances in our reserves. Questions on this? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick question. It seems to all be in order. I'm just curious about the Community Investments Reserve. both the executive committee and F&A committee, both of them have quite large transfers. I'm just wondering what's happening exactly that the money's not being spent through community investments. Thanks.
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, applications for funding from those reserves happen on an annual basis, and the frequency of application varies from year to year. This year there are fewer applications, and such that the funding requests or the recommendation from staff and approved by Finance Administration Committee is to transfer the balances where the funds could be applied in other uses.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. I'll call the question on this report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have a City Manager's report on housing incentive policy. Councillor Burdette, do you want to introduce that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, we have before us item CM 14-14, which is a supplemental report on housing incentive policy, basically housekeeping revisions, and the recommendation of this report is to receive and file.
For the seconder for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Murray.
I'll second Your Worship, and actually, if I could, I've got a motion here that I'd like to float, if I could.
Just need that for the next report, the housekeeping revisions? Is that what you were doing?
Is that all we were just doing, housekeeping? I'm sorry.
No, we're doing the...
The rest of you guys are too far behind me. I'm way ahead. I'm just not in the right spot. Thanks, Your Worship.
You're ahead of us, yes.
I'm ahead of you guys. Just
as always. This report does answer questions that were raised at the Housing Commission to clarify some points. It is received and filed. So, other comments on this report by anyone? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we have a committee report 111, which is a housing incentive policy itself. Some housekeeping revisions. A motion for that, please. Councillor Hawkins? You want to introduce it?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move the recommendations of the Mayor's Housing Commission. These are also more or less in the nature of housekeeping recommendations. There was when the housing incentives policy was revised in July of 2013. It was recommended that the revisions be reviewed a year later. These revisions are reflected in this document. They include an amendment to align the eligibility requirements across program areas. In particular, the warehouse district policy is aligned to the recently revised downtown residential incentives policy. Other small changes have been made to achieve the objectives, including an extension of the life of the required tenure of rental units from 5 to 10 years to ensure rental units receiving incentives are retained for rental purposes and not allowed to be converted into condominiums. The revisions also includes a change in the method of calculating maximum rental rates for affordable units based on the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation methodology. So those are the changes reflected in this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. The seconder for that, Councillor Young, seconded. Okay. Any comments or questions?
Your Worship, I do have a motion I'd like to add to that as well, if that's all right.
Councillor Murray?
I don't want to stifle the discussion that's here, though. That's the only.
Any other comments on the report before we move to an amendment?
Oh, no.
Councillor Donald.
Thanks. I don't have any issue with what's here and so on, and in fact I like this, but I have a question about education. We oft have before us a notion of what we're doing. So one of the things that's clearly stated here is that we're going to incent or hopefully have more rental properties. Great. I think everybody on council has approved that notion. We find people, though, who come before us and say, not in my neighborhood, or, by the way, do they really allow rentals in my neighborhood? So my question is, how do we take this document and this philosophy and take it out into the community to make sure that not just those who want to build one, but those who live in the community understand why this is a good thing?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, I think there's two answers to that. One, I'll provide you related to intensification strategy, which was recently approved in the official community plan by council. So as part of a work plan around intensification, we're not looking at just identifying locations of intensification, but some of the early work we need to do relates more to education and engagement, just a general understanding amongst with the public in terms of the benefits of intensification, and also learning from them what attributes of intensification could work well and what we can learn from sort of the local nuances within neighborhoods. So that would be a communication and engagement strategy as part of that. Specific to the housing strategy itself, Ms. Barrett, I might call upon Ms. Barrett to outline a bit of the elements of communication that we'd be doing specifically for these changes.
Ms. Barrett?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. There are a number of things we do when any policy takes place, and that is both in terms of outreach and education, and we consistently build on what we've done before. So we now have a list of about 1,500 names of people who have come forward at one time or another who are interested in the housing strategy and its implementation. So they always receive an email when something like this happens. We also, of course, provide updated information on our website. We also, in this case, will provide an ad in the city page. But the education piece is always an ongoing piece. So as we move forward with other pieces of the strategy, they all fit together towards a holistic goal of improving housing in the city.
We also have the Housing Summit that's coming up, and that will be a major element of public education.
Exactly. So I appreciate you saying that. Can I ask, I'm just going to drill down one area. When we have an open house, no matter what area it is, and we're talking about a new development that goes there, is this kind of policy or council's philosophy part of that general discussion, or is it just the actual development itself?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, open houses or any opportunity we have to engage the public, we try to take a comprehensive approach and come at it from a policy perspective. So the policies that are underpinning the applications and not just the details of, say, site planning or the application itself.
And am I correct, Mr. Mayor, that this would be a direct result of work that was done publicly in terms of engagement with the official community plan? Is there consistency with that?
I think the answer would be yes, but Mr. Carlson may want to add to that.
Your Worship, the answer would be yes with the official community plan, and as you recall, Council undertook the comprehensive housing strategy as part of that as well.
I think everything flows from that.
I agree. I just wanted that said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. Councilor Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to rise then to look at to add a motion here that the following be added to Section 4, and this would be the transition provisions of the 2014 Housing Incentive Policy. The wording, I know the clerk has it, but basically would say applications for tax exemption may be considered under the 2012 Housing Incentive Policy at the discretion of the Executive Director for dwelling units that would meet all eligibility requirements of the 2012 Housing Incentives Policy and were issued a building permit between January 1, 2012 and October 31st, 2013. Units must not currently be receiving a tax exemption based on an application for housing incentives, and all units receiving an exemption will be held to the requirements of Section 4, transition provisions under Section 7.4, exemption to reporting requirements of the 2014 HIP. Your Worship, that would be my motion that I would like to put forward.
A seconder for that? Do you have a seconder?
Sure.
Councilor Donald seconds that.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Okay, on the amendment, comments or questions? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just if someone from administration might be able to comment how many units this actually applies to. I imagine it's a few specific cases, but...
be a very small number, I believe. Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, we've been made aware of 3 situations in which people took out building permits but some time ago, but did not apply at that time for the housing exemption. Okay. So it's a limited basis.
Okay, thanks. That seems reasonable. I'll plan to support that.
Thank you. Other comments on the amendment? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. To the main motion as amended. Any other comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The last report is an information report from the Planning Commission. Anybody can do it. They want to. Councilor Donald?
I apologize. I
was going to move it.
Yeah. Anyway, we actually asked for this to not only to come to council, and so if I can move it and I get a second, I'll just
please.
Yeah, if I can make a.
Councilor Bryce.
Thanks. I want to tell you that we were really impressed with staff who were there to answer our questions, and if you allow me, I just want to address a couple, and if anybody else who was at the meeting would like to do the same. But this is an opportunity where people get the idea of what we do and how we come up with names. So the first thing is, how do we get names for streets?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Street names are nominated either by members of the public or sometimes by developers. And on occasion, the administration has suggested names itself. They come in front of the Civic Naming Committee, which is an administrative committee, and that's made up of folks from the City Clerk's office, the Community Services Department, the Planning Department, the Fire Department. I think that's everything. Oh, no, we got one from Geomatics, mapping and traffic. And the guidelines are approved by City Council, and the reports go through the Regina Planning Commission.
If I could, I would just also like a brief explanation as to the type of criteria we're looking for a name, if I could.
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So criteria, you can nominate people. People usually have to have contributed to the community, so through volunteer efforts, through public service, through achievements in a career field. There's a provision to recognize Aboriginal peoples whose traditional home is the Regina Plains. There's provisions to recognize politicians, including city councillors that have served at least 2 terms in the city.
That's not you, Councillor Dowell.
I'm good.
There's also a provision to nominate people who have served in emergency services, so fire, police, RCMP, with the military, who have achieved in their field or sacrificed as part of their duties. There's a provision to nominate folks that have, let me see. There's a provision to nominate flora, fauna, and terms regarding the province of Saskatchewan in the area of Regina, and the royal family, because clearly Regina has connections with the royal family and as the Queen City.
Thank you. So I just have one follow-up. So once the names are accepted and they sit in this grouping, how do they get selected? Who selects? And do we have just a massive amount of names waiting to be selected or a small number?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There are currently 632 total names in wait, actually, but about half of those right now are reserved for developers. So there are subdivisions or neighborhood plans in the process of being developed within the city. So what happens after the names come in front of the Civic Naming Committee, they're approved for use. Sometimes they get used right away, especially if they are connected with a development plan. Sometimes they linger on the list for a little while. Probably the longest name we had linger was Mr. Deathridge, who you folks might recall from last year. But he did get used last year on a street. They can be selected by a developer. It is the developers that select which names go on which streets. The city itself does not develop a whole lot of streets, although they have named all of the major arterials in the last little while and a few other subdivisions such as Hawkstone and in the industrial area.
Very good. So I just finished with this thought. I hope that people who are listening and watching will give consideration to the many worthy people out there that could be nominated in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. Do we ever change a name if a name becomes infamous and people don't want it on their street? Do we ever do that? And if so, how would a street go about petitioning to get that change done? I don't know who wants to.
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Street name changes are actually very infrequent. They come in front of City Council because the Civic Naming Committee has no authorization to change a street name. We have not yet had one that's been changed because of the infamy of the person who was nominated. How the process typically goes is that the planning department actually inquires of the residents whether or not they want the street name changed, and if there's protests from the neighborhood, because it does involve you having to change your address and file paperwork, then usually the petition is then dropped. If it is approved, it goes forward first to the Planning Commission, and then it would go forward to City Council, who would have the ultimate say.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify, I'm not saying that somebody we picked has turned to infamy. Just sometimes names are common, and somebody else in the world has done wrong. So, thanks.
I think we did have a case where a spelling error was on a street, and we corrected that, and the process was very transparent, but not quite so simple. Just a comment to the administration. Ms. Turgeon, you want to comment on that? I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We haven't changed a whole lot of street names. We changed Gandhi so that the spelling was correct on that one a few years ago. And we did attempt to change Hammerstrom, which is on the city maps as Hamstrom. In that case, the residents did protest, but I will field those ones to Mr. Carlson because it was his department.
Okay. Mr. Carlson, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. It's okay. We got it. We got it. Councilor Ventura, then Councilor Flagel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I noticed there's, just give me, explain, there was one denial. How do you, what's the criteria on denying someone's on the name? I mean,
through you, Mr. Mayor, if a name is denied, it is usually because it doesn't actually fit the guidelines. It's quite common for someone to not quite meet the residency requirements, which is 10 years. So we've had a few, I can think of a few famous football players that haven't quite lived in Regina for the full 10 years and thus didn't quite qualify. That said, usually if it's someone that I know has qualified or should qualify, I'll just go back to the applicant and ask them again for more information. And quite often, if people take a second pass at it, they can find some more information.
okay, thank you. And then I know probably was answered already, but once it leaves our hands here or leaves the naming committee and it goes out there somewhere, you were saying that names could sit there, but there's some names with well, nothing wrong how it sounds. And the names could sit in a developer, could sit someplace for a long time. Is there any movement that something could be done to kind of, reach to the bottom and stir up that bottom to see if we can get things rolling? What's the criteria for that? Because, I mean, I hear there are some names we put out, and they've been sitting there for 10, 15 years, and nothing's moved on it. To Your Worship.
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We have no provision right now to force a developer to use a name in a certain order off the list. So we're kind of depending on the largesse of the developers. There is the option that does occur that the city may develop property itself, in which case they could name a street, which is how Mr. Deathridge's name got on there. There is also the possibility of getting a park named. Park naming has a public component in which a neighborhood association has to agree to the name. So sometimes that makes it a little quicker to go through than the developer route.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel.
Thanks. I asked this at planning too, but I'm just wondering, there was one other part. When a developer comes forward and he's got a theme of names, and I know Hawkstone was the Rough Riders, can they just go ahead and do that, or do they need to go through the city to get approval first?
Ms. Turgeon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they still need to have the names approved via the Civic Naming Committee, so they do have to actually fit the guidelines. Okay. So they mostly bring forward themes that would fit with those guidelines. So with this particular report, there's usually quite a few names relating to flora and fauna, which has kind of been a developer favorite. But as you mentioned, there's Rough Riders and other themes that they select.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to come forward and bring forward names of cars, as an example, like Ferraris and Corvettes, and they wanted to name a street and a zone or an area, would that fit a criteria, or does it have to be a person?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it does not have to be a person. However, it does have to fit the guidelines. Okay. And the guidelines are very deliberately written to have a Regina focus or a Saskatchewan focus. So it would have to have a significant Saskatchewan component to it.
Okay. Now, my other question I asked at planning too is, one other thing is, we had the land that was sold by Parliament Avenue and Harbour Landing, and it was the Beaudry land. Now, have they come forward and asked for any specifics in terms of can it just be the father, like Mr. Beaudry, or could it be names of his children, because they're all part of Regina, they're all part of his lands? Could it be anything to do with the Beaudry family, or would it just be Leo Lane or Beaudry Avenue, or how does that work when there's more than one person in that family, but it's all land given or sold?
Ms. Turgeon, she'll tell you.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as long as the person qualifies under the street naming guidelines, typically we don't make deals with people for naming a street in exchange for land. If they do qualify under the guidelines, they would get their last name, so it would be Beaudry, but it could be named for as many Beaudrys as would qualify under the guidelines. Okay. So some of the more common names like Brown or Smith might have half a dozen people who are being recognized for that same street name.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. That's all I want.
I have a question, Ms. Turgeon. You've been giving very good answers here. Harbor Landing, it seems to me, was a different process for naming, where they actually asked for an aviation theme to it, which is a different dimension from what happened. How did that work, and how did that fit the guidelines? I know it did because we approved it, but it's very different for a whole subdivision to ask for names already suggested and then they wanted it approved.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at the time, that went through as a special exemption through the Executive Council Committee, which was at that point the committee that the street naming committee fed into. And it was a special exemption. It now exists so that for future developments within Harvard, they have an exemption for aviation terms, aviators, and things connected with airplanes. So they don't necessarily have to have a Saskatchewan theme, although the developer has been fairly good about selecting aviators that have a Saskatchewan connection.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Other comments on the report? Thank you for the answers. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconder, please.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.